Hi everybody, welcome to the Mastermind review session. Grab your notes and your homework pages and let's get started. So today our goal is to fine-tune your checklists, help everybody really understand the process that we're going through to greater detail, because we want to make sure that for yourself and for your team, you're creating an environment of ever-expanding growth where you're always getting better at what you do, so you can have more success and however you define that, more freedom, more security, more support, a good whole brain support system for what we're doing here. The agenda is simple enough. First, we're going to understand the science behind the checklist and why it has such a profound impact on the process. Second, review the role of stakeholders. So when you ask someone to be a stakeholder or if somebody asks you to be a stakeholder, you know what you're in for. Three, get feedback on your checklist, doing that in small group phone calls. And if you're catching up on this in a recorded session, you can go ahead and email those into us and we will review those and send those back to you. And then we'll have a little bit of homework for you at the very end. And as far as support, Justin and I are available to review folks' homework and give you suggestions on those things. So again, as you finish up your checklist and goals, or as you get suggestions on them, go ahead and send those in, and we can give you some ideas and thoughts on those as we move forward. So before we get into the main part of the work today, just want to take a couple minutes and talk about the checklist idea and why it's such an important part of the process. The idea is based on the work of Dr. Atul Gawande, who is a medical researcher and has a great book called The Checklist Manifesto. So I highly suggest you take a few minutes and get that book and push through it. And if you can't do that, at least go on YouTube and check out some of his TED Talks and things like that. But what he was trying to solve is he was looking into the issue of why there's 150,000 surgery deaths just in the US every year. And it's estimated that about 50% of them are due just to simple human error. And they wanted to find a way to really turn that thing around. And what they decided to do was investigate other high risk professions that did not have such catastrophically high rates of accidents. So they looked at pilots, construction workers, anybody that does like outdoor adventure work. I used to do ropes courses and things like that, so I appreciated this process. And what they discovered is that every one of those high risk industries had very specific checklists that people always went through before they did any kind of high risk work. So a pilot, before he takes off, even though the pilot is highly trained, highly experienced, and a true professional, there's somebody in the co-pilot seat that makes them go through a checklist every single time before they take off. Flaps are up, engines on, fuel tanks are full. All of the buttons and lights need to be checked to make sure that nothing goes wrong. Same thing in construction. When they say construction, they mean like high-rise construction, big, large projects. And before they bring a crane on site or start rolling in literally tons of steel and concrete, they have very specific checklists they go through to make sure that things go smoothly. When we ran people through zip lines and climbing walls, we had a very step-by-step process for making sure their harness was on correctly, making sure the helmet was on correctly, making sure the knot's tied, making sure all the backup gear is all ready, that the facilitator's ready with the rope and all of that stuff every single time, because it's easy to get on automatic pilot and miss a step. So what they found is when they took a very good checklist process that was designed with the surgeons, the doctors, the nurses, the support staff, they were able to cut complications in surgery by 36% and cut overall hospital death rates by 47%, which is a huge number. That's so far ahead of so many other things that we can do to help folks out. Simple questions like, do we have the right patient on the table? Did the surgeon wash his hands? Little things like that you don't think are a big deal at the time, but if we get in too much of a habit in what we do, we can skip over some of those important little details and have catastrophic results and not realize that it was that little situation that it came to. So again, this is part of why we developed the checklist to support the goal. It's great to have that goal, but we need to have those little steps that we take every day to make sure it never falls through the cracks. And we're going to combine that with new information about the brain. It's called the reticulating activating system. That's not new. It's been in our brains all along. But they're really understanding a lot better. The reticular activating system is the part of your brain that decides what you should pay attention to and what you should not pay attention to. And really, it tells us what not to pay attention to more than what to pay attention to. There's an infinite number of things that we can notice. The RIS says, here's what's important enough to focus on. Everything else we're going to block out. And this is important because we don't get what we want, we get what we consistently focus on. If someone's convinced that they're going to have a bad day, they're going to find reasons why they should be having a bad day. And if somebody's convinced they should be having a good day, they're going to find reasons to have a good day, and all points in between. You've probably noticed the RAS in action, like, for example, when you go shopping. If you decide you want to get a new car, say I'm going to get a Toyota Corolla or something like that. As soon as you think about that, your brain goes, oh, that's important. Let me start looking for it. And as you drive down the street, you're going to see that car all up and down the road. You're going to see it in parking lots. You're going to see commercials for it on TV, and just very fortunately be a sale happening right now on that very car. The sales have been there all along. The cars have been there all along. But now that we're looking for it, we're noticing it. This happens a lot in what they call research bias. If someone does research and they think the answer is going to be a certain thing, then when they do the research, they will find the result that they're looking for, which is why you have to have double-blind studies and peer-reviewed journals and things like that, so we don't fall into that. Same thing will happen on test scores. There was an amazing study they did a while back where they preloaded somebody's thoughts before they took a test to see how it would affect their test scores. For example, one of the things that they tested, there is a, no, I'm not saying this is true, I'm just saying that folks think this, so don't come back at me with it. So folks have a strong belief that men are better at science than women are. Again, I'm not saying that's true, but it is a belief that a lot of folks hold. So when they took a science and math test, and the first question on the test was, are you male or female? And if the test was taken by a female that had that question as the first question versus women who would take that test without that being the first question, those women would score 10% lower on that test, with the only difference being the first question was, are you a female? They took another group, same math test, and tested another presupposition that folks have that Asians are better at math. And they would make the first question on half the tests, what's your race? And if somebody wrote down the race was Asian, they would score 10% better on that test than Asians who were taking the same test, but that was not the first question on the test. And again, that was the only difference. So again, how we preload our brain determines how well we do in any category. So in leadership, if we're going to be better leaders, we have to have a clear goal, something we're getting better at, and then have a checklist of what we're going to do to get better at it, and then load that checklist into our brains every morning. If we do that consistently, we're going to be much more effective leaders. So here's how we put this to work. If we combine the checklist plus the RAS, the reticulated activating system, we get something that's called priming. Priming is a process of checking in each morning for just a few minutes and making sure our brains and our schedules are focused on what's most important for us for the day. Made a little note there of RPMs. This is a simple little way to remember it. The R stands for results. What is the most essential thing to accomplish today? If we're focused on that, and then everything else comes in second place, we have a much better chance of accomplishing it. But then we add to that, what's the purpose? Why is that result important? That gives us more energy and more drive to make that thing happen. It also helps us make sure that we pick the right result. If we don't have a good purpose for why that result is important, maybe we shouldn't be pursuing that result. Then we add on our third chunk, which is the massive action plan. You can call it the MAP for short, which is what actions will ensure that those results happen. So I've got the result. I know the result's important. What am I going to do step by step today to make that happen? And your checklist is part of how you make that happen. And then the last one, support. Who do I need support from today, and who do I need to give support to today? And that really helps us get a complete picture of what we're doing and making sure that we're not leaving anyone behind and getting the help that we need. And you notice we've got the four colors there. We're making sure that the blue part of our brain is happy because it knows what the result is. We're making sure that the yellow part of our brain is happy because it knows why we're doing it. Green part of our brain is happy because we have a plan, a system for getting there. And the red part of our brain is happy because it knows that we're going to have people to back us up, and we're going to be making sure that we support other people while we do it. This is also an important part of managing a team. Our team needs to know what's the result that we're heading for, what's the purpose behind that result, what's our plan for getting there, and how do we support each other, and who's going to be supporting us and how. Folks that use this are athletes. If you see any top tier athlete or team before they take the field, they've got kind of a priming ritual they put themselves through. Performers before they get on stage almost always have some kind of routine or ritual that they go through to get themselves in the right state of mind. Billionaires, if we want to copy folks that are uber successful in business, they have a very specific morning routine to get their mind right for the day. And again, a great team make sure they've got some kind of rally point before they start the day where they're getting themselves ready for the day. If you can put this simple little process, the morning checklist, making sure you look at your goal, your checklist, and whatever else is important to you for the day, take 5 to 10 minutes and do that little RPMs cycle the first thing in the morning. You can have a massive impact on the quality of day that you have and the impact that you have on the folks around you. So let's take a few minutes and go over the forms. They're going to help you out with this process. You should have already done these, or at least have the forms. If you don't have the forms, let us know. We'll get them out to you. If you do have the forms, please get them filled out and sent in as quick as you can. So the primary form this whole process is based on is the weekly behavioral checklist. So with this checklist, you're going to jot down your goal, the opposite of the bad habit that you identified, and again, stated in the positive and future focus. So this is what I'm doing. Then you're going to have your 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 observable behaviors that support that specific goal. So you also want to make sure that these are stated in such a way that other people can see you do them. If it's something that you think about or something that you feel or something you consider, other people can't tell if you're doing that. So you really want to take some time, think these through, and make sure there's something that other folks can see. You don't have a lot of writing space, and that's on purpose. You want the checklist to be short, sweet, and succinct, something that's easy to digest in the morning, something that's easy for your brain to keep track of during the day, and also easy for your stakeholders to look at and go, yes, I see this leader doing it, or no, I haven't seen this leader doing this. So again, you're going to take just a minute every morning, read your goal and look over your checklist items, make sure this is fresh in your brain for the day. And then at the end of the day, you're going to take about 30 seconds and just check yourself. On Monday, did I do observable behavior 1? Yes. Did I do behavior number 2? Nope, didn't do that today. Did I do 3? Yes, and so on. Then at the end of the week, we'll start seeing patterns show up. If there's a behavior that you do every single day without fail, and after a few weeks or a couple of months, you're like, this is always happening, then it no longer needs to be on your checklist. Your checklist is for things that you need to create a habit from, not things that are already automatic. If something is happening sporadically, then you need to dig in a little bit deeper and maybe give yourself other notes and reminders during the day to make sure that that happens consistently. And then if it's something that never happens, we might need to reevaluate whether or not it actually supports your goal, or maybe it clashes with your thinking style and it's just something you're not going to do. Maybe we just need to reword it a little bit so it's something that your brain can latch onto, whatever it is. And that's what we're here to do, is kind of help you work out those issues as they pop up. So again, you write down your goal, you write down your observable behaviors. Each morning, you take about 1 minute to scan them. Then you take a few more minutes to think about the rest of your day and your RPMs. At the end of the day, you take 30 seconds and check each thing that you did or didn't do that day. At the end of the week, you just kind of evaluate, make some notes, and then send this whole form on into us, and then we can give you feedback as we see how your stats come out. The next form that you're going to be working with is your stakeholder list. This one you've only got to do once. You're going to jot down the names of everybody that you think could be a good stakeholder. And here's an important thing about a stakeholder. You might have different stakeholders depending on what your goal is. If you were to do this process 2 or 3 times, you might have 2 or 3 different groups of stakeholders. So your stakeholder needs to be someone who sees you frequently enough that they can comment and actually has some skin in the game for the goal that you're working on. So if your goal is to treat your direct reports with more kindness and decency, well, folks side to side from you in different departments don't really need to know that. Whereas if it's to advocate for your department better, those folks would be better stakeholders. So again, think of stakeholders who see you often enough that they can comment, but also have a reason to support your goal for their own reasons. So you're going to jot all those down, and once you have a good idea who you want to have in your stakeholder list, you're going to invite all of them and then see who says yes. And you want to end up with bare minimum 4, preferably like 6 to 8 seems to be the ideal range. I wouldn't go for a lot more than that because it just starts taking a lot more of your time. And once you get beyond 8 folks, you start getting a lot of redundant feedback that doesn't really help you out. So we want to make sure that this is as efficient for you and as efficient for the folks around you can. So once you have your goal and your checklist, You've sent that in to us. We've given you any feedback or suggestions on it. And then once you have your stakeholders that you've invited, then you will send your checklist to them. You will not send it to them before they have agreed to be part of your process. You want to make sure that you hear from them first. And then the last thing is the monthly follow-up. So about 3-4 weeks from whenever you invite your stakeholders to be on your team, you will get in contact with each one of them for about 1 to 2 minutes each, maybe 3, and just get their feedback on how you've been doing. So you say, stakeholder 1, for the last month, I've been working on including my direct reports in more decision making, and my observable behaviors have been X, Y, and Z. What have you noticed over the last month, and what suggestions do you have for how I can get better next month? And then, as you guys know the rules, we stop talking, we turn our ears on, and we absorb whatever it is they want to tell us. We just capture all their notes, we say thank you, and then we move on. We don't give them any responses or replies. We don't push back. We don't justify. And before we do the monthly stakeholder calls here in a few weeks, we'll have another little tutorial on that process out for you. So again, you're going to check in with each of your stakeholders, ask them what they've noticed in the last month, what suggestions can they give for you next month, and then you move on. Once you've gotten everybody's feedback, then you're going to go back and look at your checklist and say, what on here might I need to either refine or upgrade or add in order to make sure that people are seeing me seriously working on this goal, and then move on from there. And again, as you get those suggestions, shoot them back to us. We'll help you refine your checklist, and then you would send that back out to your stakeholders prior to month 2. So in case that sounds like a lot, here's just a quick review. Once your system is set up, once you have your goal and your checklist items, you're going to take 1 minute each morning, 10 minutes if you're serious with the rest of the RPMs, to review your checklist. You're going to take 30 seconds at the end of the day to rate yourself, what things you did or didn't do that day. Then you're going to take 2 minutes at the end of the week, kind of scan your scoreboard and then send it in. And then at the end of the month, you're going to take about 30 minutes and check in with each of your stakeholders for a few minutes each, and make sure you get their feedback and upgrade as necessary. That's it. If you can do those couple things, 1 minute in the morning, 30 seconds at the end of the day, 2 minutes at the end of the week, and about half an hour at the end of the month, this system will pay huge dividends for you. And we have some stats to back it up for you, because again, this process only works as well as you work it. If you don't check in with your stakeholders or only check with them a little bit or here and there, there's probably a 30 to 60% chance that not much is going to happen for you in the process. In fact, some folks even get worse once they've identified a habit but have decided not to seriously work on it. They'll actually backslide. But in a study of 11,000 leaders in 6 different multinational companies on 4 continents, 95% of leaders who consistently involve their stakeholders in the process had measurable improvement in their effectiveness. Let that soak in. 95% of the leaders who consistently checked in had measurable progress. So all you have to do is make sure that you read that checklist each morning and then check in with your stakeholders once a month. And 95% of you are going to have a big step up in your effectiveness as a leader and also in your reputation as a leader. And again, for that, not even an hour a month, I think that's a fantastic return on investment for your time. All right, so let's take a minute and review one of our leaders' goal and checklist items. And to get started, here's their brain. I find that looking at the profile while I'm reviewing the goal and the checklist is very, very helpful. So you notice this person, they've got a nice, healthy, square brain, pretty even in the blue, the yellow, and the green, a little bit stronger in the red, so a little bit more of a emotive person or a people person, and that's going to affect what we see in all their stuff. Here is the checklist that they sent in. They were working on the need to rate others and impose their standards on them. That was the bad habit that they identified. So the goal they came up with was, I'm trying to be open to others' way of doing things. Not a bad intention to have. And their checklist was to first work on not applying historical thoughts, ask the why to understand the behavior, ask what outcome were you trying to achieve, and allow the full view to come out, formulate another question to get more information. So first pass, that's pretty good stuff. Definitely great intention behind it, and we can see where the person's going at. But I did have a couple of thoughts on this one. So I highlighted a few things here that I thought would be important to look at. First, I highlighted passing judgment, not because there's anything wrong with this, but just because we want to make sure that this does not go out to the stakeholders. When you recruit your stakeholders, you're going to tell them what your goal and your checklist behaviors are, but we don't tell them what the old behavior was that we're trying to get rid of. Again, the reason for that is the reticulated activating system. I don't want you to every morning think about passing judgment on others, and I don't want all the people around you looking at you going, are they passing judgment on others? Because again, people see what they want to see. They see what they expect. So we use that in the design process, but it does not go on any of the forms. On the goal, first thing that I highlighted was the I'm trying to. The goal needs to be stated in the positive and in the present tense. And this is what I am, not what I'm trying to be. So we want to take out the I'm trying to. And the other ways, you'll see in a second why I highlighted that when I show you the rewrite. On the behaviors, first one I highlighted was work on not. Our brain cannot not do things. How's that for a mouthful? So if I tell you don't think of pink elephants, the very first thing that happens is your brain starts thinking of pink elephants, and then you're trying, furiously to erase that image from your mind. So that's what I don't like about this first checklist item. We can't tell our brain to not do something, because in order to not do it, it has to picture doing it and then try to stop doing it. So we only want to state things, again, in the positive behavior that we want to do, not the things we don't want to do. And the other one I highlighted was the allow the full view to come out. It's a great intention, but it's not really an observable behavior. I can't see someone doing that. So I want this person to have a more proactive thing to do. So here's some of the changes I would make to this one. So here's the edits I came up with. First, I just modified the goal a little bit to be open to other people's way of doing things. Since this person is very red, I wanted to draw the extra focus on people's way of doing things, not just the systems themselves. On the behaviors, talk only about the current situation. So rather than don't think about historical situations, this way we can put it on positive, and by saying talk only about, that's something observable that other people can see this person's doing. Next, express appreciation for their effort and intention. So again, this is something they can say and they can do that supports the people that they're talking to, and helps us find bits and pieces of what they're saying that we can like, so it's not an all or nothing issue. Also express appreciation for what they did well. So if we want to be open to other people's way of doing things, this person is going to be able to do that more consistently if they can appreciate the effort and intention and look for things that were done well in it. Now it's not just a pass-fail kind of thing. The next one was ask people questions so I understand their thinking and their approach. Again, it's an observable behavior and gets this person into a conversation with people rather than just passing judgment. And the last one, ask people what outcome they were trying to achieve. So again, we can understand their intention and where they were going, and then we can have kind of a brainstorm session about other ways to get there, which sets this person up well. I put a little caution note under that last one because how that question is asked, it can be a very curious and sincere fact-finding question. It could also be an accusation, like, what were you thinking when you did this? So I just want to make sure this person is really being careful how they use that question. But again, can you see how this is much more positive? It's stated in observable actions and specific things. If she reads this list every morning, she can have a much more effective day. And she can even cheat and print this out on a sheet and put it on a clipboard. So whenever she goes into a meeting, she's got these questions right in front of her, and it helps her kind of remember to do those things when she's nose to nose with somebody. Great little cheat sheet you can do there. So as you're going through your checklist, again, look at your goal. Is it stated in the positive, and is it stated in the present tense? I am this, or I do this, or I treat people this way. Are your behaviors observable? Could other people see you doing them? Do they positively and consistently support your goal? And can other people see you doing them and benefit from them? That's all you need to do. Just scan down the list, check those things, and then you should be in good shape. And again, as you write your goal and your checklist, send them on in. We'll review them. We might have a few suggestions for you on a couple of wording changes and things, and we'll send them back. And then you can send it out to your stakeholders. And then at the end of the month, when you've gotten feedback from your stakeholders, let us know what feedback they gave you, and we'll also have your weekly checklist. And between those two things, we'll be able to give you some intelligent suggestions on how to fine-tune your list for the next month so you can be even more effective then. So we've talked a lot about the stakeholders. I just want to review real quick what the stakeholders are going to be doing. So when you ask someone to be a stakeholder, you know what you're asking them to do, and you can explain it to them a little bit if they haven't been a part of the process so far. You may have stakeholders that aren't part of this class, and you still want to be able to explain it to them. So there's only three things you need them to do. They need to be able to regularly observe you in action. So we're asking the stakeholders to pay attention to you on this specific topic. It can feel a little exposed at first, but they already notice it. So this way you're kind of calling it out in the open, you're calling yourself out, and they will respect you for being willing to work on it and being willing to acknowledge that it's something that needs to be improved. The second thing you're asking them to do is once a month, you're going to ask them to give you 2 or 3 suggestions for improvement. Again, what have you done for the last month? What can you do in the upcoming month to be better at reaching your goal? This only needs to be about 2 to 5 minutes. This can be an email, especially if they're a blue. They'll appreciate just an email with those couple of questions. You can give them a quick call on the phone. You can schedule a face-to-face meeting, especially if they are more red or you're more red. That may be a healthier approach to the process. And again, it doesn't have to be a formal thing at the end of the month. If your goal is to encourage others to speak up more in meetings, something like that, well, then on your way out of your meeting, if 1 or 2 of your stakeholders in that meeting, you can grab them in the hall and go, hey, I've been trying to work on encouraging other people to speak up more in meetings. Did you notice some of that? Did you see me doing anything? Do you have any suggestions on how we can do that better? And, strike while the iron's hot, so to speak. If you catch them while it's fresh in their mind, you'll get really, really good feedback in the moment, and you won't necessarily have to wait till the end of the month and do it as a formal check-in process. And of course, quarterly, you're going to ask that person to participate in a 5 to 10 minute anonymous survey. So basically, we have a little stock survey that we can send out to your stakeholders saying, how has Bill been doing with this goal? What have and what suggestions you have for them getting better? And when you see those stats, from that -3 to +3 scale, that's where that comes from. And that's where you get some real honest metrics from folks about how you're doing. And then after that 3-4 month point, that's where we can make bigger changes if we need to in the system. So if you're asking someone to be a stakeholder, you're asking them to just pay attention to you when they're involved with you on that topic. You're asking them to once a month chat with you for 2 to 5 minutes or email with you to give you some suggestions and feedback. And then once a quarter or so, 3, 4, 5 months, take 5 or 10 minutes just to rate you on a quick little anonymous survey so you've got some real feedback. And if someone asks you to be a stakeholder, this is what you're going to be doing for them. So your homework at this point, we've covered a lot of it. I want to make sure you've got it in one easy to digest place. So the things you should be doing right away, if you haven't already done these, I want you to do these right away, is first, make sure you identify and or clarify what your one behavioral goal is going to be to improve. Create your checklist of 3 to 5, maybe 6 observable behaviors that support that goal. Prepare a list of 4 to 8 stakeholders that you will check in with each month. And then send your coach, me, your goal and your checklist and your list of proposed stakeholders. Then we'll review that and give you feedback on that before you go out to the next step, which hopefully you'll do within a few days, which is to actually invite your stakeholders to be on your stakeholder team. Again, we don't do that until after you've sent your goal and checklist to us and we've given you any suggestions on that before you make it public. Then you're going to send your stakeholders your goal and your checklist. So you invite them, and then the folks come back and say yes. Those are the folks you're going to send your checklist to. If they can't even take the time to send you back a yes, don't assume that they're a stakeholder and don't put them on the list. You want folks who are going to be serious about supporting you. Then 3 to 4 weeks from now, you're going to check in with your stakeholders, see what observations they have about the last month, and then what suggestions they have for the month coming forward. After checking in, you're going to send your notes in to your coach so we can back you up by giving you suggestions on any fine-tunements that you might want to make to your checklist. And then after your check-ins are done, you're going to send any updates on your checklist to us, and then send any updates to your goal or checklist to your stakeholders. So you ask your stakeholders how they've been doing, get their suggestions, then you send those notes in to us. We send you back any suggestions, and then you send your updated checklist out to your stakeholders again for the next month. And then 3-4 weeks, start the process over again. So that's it. Again, 1 minute in the morning to review your checklist, a few more minutes to do your RPMs for the day. At the end of the day, 30 seconds to hit your checklist. Make sure you rate yourself for the day. At the end of the week, take 2 or 3 minutes and look at how you scored throughout the week and think of any thoughts you need to and send that down in. And then 3-4 weeks of that, you check in with your stakeholders, see what suggestions they have, collect all that information, send it into us. We'll look at any refinements we need to make to your checklist, send it back out to your stakeholders, and away you go. So again, a minute in the morning, 30 seconds at the end of the day, 3 minutes at the end of the week, half an hour at the end of the month. If you can do that for 6 months, it will revolutionize your reputation and your leadership ability. If you've got any questions on this process, shoot us an email. We're here to back you up. We wish you good things, and we will check in with you again in a few weeks.